Hi everybody, in this video we're going to be looking at excess demand and excess supply. And excess means that there is more of something, if we've got excess of something. And we're going to use one diagram for each: excess demand, excess supply. Let's imagine instead of being at the equilibrium price in a market, for some reason the price is not the equilibrium price. For example, the price might be below the equilibrium price, so the price isn't here, but it's lower. We can use the diagram to show us what the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded will be at a different price that's below the equilibrium price. If I draw my dotted line across here, so let's imagine that we're at P1. P1 is below the equilibrium price of P. And we can see the situation at P1 by seeing where we are on the supply and demand curve. So first of all, at P1, when do you bump into the supply curve? Here. When you bump into the supply curve, that tells you the quantity that will be supplied at P1. So it'll be QS. And then we can see at P1 how much is being demanded at that price. And we read across, we bump into the demand curve, and it's what we'll call QD, the quantity being demanded. And we can see when the price is below the equilibrium price, this means that more people will want to demand the product because it's a lower price than normal. And remember, when we move from here to here, we call that an extension of demand. We've moved along the demand curve due to a change in price. Suppliers, on the other hand, if they're not receiving such a high price, they're only receiving P1 for their product rather than P, they won't want to supply as much. So instead of them supplying Q at P1, they'll only supply QS. And when we move from here along the supply curve to here, this is called a contraction of supply. It's got smaller. So at this price below the equilibrium, we can see that our quantity demanded is bigger than our quantity supplied. And the difference between these two is called excess demand. There is more demand than there is supply. And the excess demand is this distance here. And if you had numbers, you could work out what that excess demand was on the graph. But it means that we've got more demand than supply. And that's because the price is below the equilibrium. If we want to look at excess supply, this would be where the price is higher than the equilibrium price. So again, you can put in a dotted line and then you can read the graph to find out at this higher price of P1 how much will be demanded and how much will be supplied. And we know here that P1 is above the equilibrium price of P. And when the price is higher than the equilibrium price, let's read how much demand there is. Demand is here. So let's mark in where we bump into the demand curve. This is our quantity being demanded. And the reason that less is demanded than at the equilibrium is because the price is higher. Less people can afford the product, so quantity demanded is lower. However, at the higher price, suppliers want to supply a higher quantity than they did at the equilibrium price because they're getting more money for the product. So the quantity supplied is higher. And what we've seen, there has been a contraction of demand and there has been an extension of supply. And now our quantity supplied is greater than our quantity demanded. So here we have excess supply. And the excess supply could be shown in the diagram by this distance between what the demand is and what the supply is. And that is your excess supply.